U.S. President Barack Obama urges young Africans to build on progress. A huge breakthrough in the fight against Ebola. And one of the music industry's most enduring couples announced they're splitting. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Lenore Moudou. This is Africa 54. Vincent Makori is off today. The 2015 class of the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program is ready to return to Africa after harnessing their skills in civic leadership, public management, and entrepreneurship. U.S. President Barack Obama addressed the Mandela Fellows on Monday as part of the Young African Leaders Initiative. Africa 54's Esther Gitui-Ewart attended the presidential summit and has our report.
Often referred to as Africa's best and brightest, the Yali Fellows say they're ready to take their position as leaders in innovation and business and turn the African continent around with positive economic change. Welcoming the U.S. President to the podium, Grace Jerry of Nigeria echoed the feelings of most Yali Fellows about their newfound source of inspiration.
Sending us forth as young African leaders to become that change that our continent deserves. One man has shown with his life and character that change and greatness is possible if only you will try.
President Obama says this second class of Yali Fellows comes at a significant time just as he returned from a trip to Africa.
It was my fourth trip to sub-Saharan Africa, more than any other U.S. president, and I was proud to be the first U.S. president to visit Kenya, the first to visit Ethiopia, the first to address the African Union, which was a great honor.
Rose Sylvia Nakafu is a Yali Fellow from Uganda. She says the program has certainly motivated her to achieve her goal.
I feel empowered after an experience of 6 weeks working with communities, working with organizations just like the one I work for back home, and of course looking at the issue that I would like to contribute to solving in my country, that is youth unemployment.
Saisan Nkwashu from South Africa uses art and culture as a platform to address the high rate of youth unemployment in rural areas.
What I'm taking back with me is humanity, the spirit of Ubuntu. Learning that I am because you are because I am. We need each other as Africans.
Kezi Mukiri, a fellow from Kenya, is now focused on women entrepreneurship.
I have seen the journey of how much you can change people's lives through entrepreneurship. You create solutions, you create employment, and you even give hope.
President Obama announced that a new facility opened Monday in Accra, Ghana, and 2 more will be opening later in Pretoria, South Africa, and Dakar, Senegal, to empower young Africans. And for Vimbisho Mashumba of Zimbabwe, President Obama's speech struck a chord.
One of the most powerful things the president spoke about was access to education. So I was also torn between education and entrepreneurship, because I do believe that entrepreneurship is the vehicle that will bring Africa out of poverty.
President Obama implored the youth fellows to become agents of positive change in Africa by rebuilding their countries and creating an environment in which young people can succeed. Esther Gitui-Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
As part of our special yearly coverage this week on Africa 54, we bring you 2 more profiles of the Mandela Fellows. Cesar Medina of Zimbabwe uses documentaries to tell the story of those in the community who have no voice.
Hi, my name is Cesar Medina. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm studying civic leadership at Tulane University.
Anything can change can either ruin an entire crop. So
I'm a documentary film producer.
For the time specific.
I studied agriculture. There are not a lot of active filmmakers in Zimbabwe, especially women filmmakers. So I'm proud to say I'm one of the few. Why I chose documentary filmmaking, I believe that the community had a voice that was not being heard. The people had a voice that was not being heard. And that is what I have at heart. I really want our stories as a people to be heard. Because before I'm a filmmaker, I'm a citizen of the community. And I'm just using now my talents to actually upscale the voices of the people. During this yearly experience, I got the opportunity to be partnered with 2 Cent TV, which is actually a prominent youth engagement platform here in New Orleans. The thing that I learned from them is that how they are using this kind of engagement, especially TV, to talk about the social problems, to talk about the issues that they have, and especially targeting young people. I think that's amazing. These young people are actually tackling some issues like violence in the cities, because apparently New Orleans has the highest violence rates in the world. And so they are actually talking about those issues in their films. You know, they make up their own music videos, they make up their own short films that talk about the issues. One thing that I didn't know, and one thing that I've actually got to learn through this program, is that arts have every right to actually be civic leaders, especially because they've got a voice and they can creatively come up with solutions that people need. I can say sometimes that our ministers or our leaders sometimes are not the most creative people, and sometimes all we need are creative solutions to our problems. And so that's the mesh that I see between art and being a civic leader. YALI is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I would encourage every young Zimbabwean to apply, every young Zimbabwean who dreams to be an effective leader, because here it's not only about learning from the international examples that have been set before us, but it's about learning also from the other young African leaders who may or actually are going through the same social and economic problems that we have back at home.
In our next YALI profile, you will meet a young activist, Gabriel Hussain, who uses art to give voice to the LGBT community in South Africa.
My name is Gabriel Hussain. I'm from South Africa, and I'm on the civic leadership track at Tulane University. I coordinate a project working with LGBTI youth in Southern Africa, and through this project we use creative methods like visual art, interactive drama and creative writing to empower LGBTI youth in the Southern African region. So art is useful for 2 reasons. Firstly, it creates a space where young people can talk about their experience and talk about their feelings and their challenges in life. And secondly, it becomes a way for young people to be more visible through their artworks and through their stories. One of the challenges we have as young leaders on the African continent is, while we might be inspired to create change in our communities, we don't have all the skills or capabilities. And I thought this would be an opportunity to strengthen my capabilities as a leader.
2015, how much we have remained.
While in New Orleans, I've been based at the Institute for Women and Ethnic Studies, which is a group of individuals doing work around women of color here in New Orleans. And in a way, what I appreciate about their work is they tie together 2 struggles that I think are connected, both here in the US and in South Africa. The issue of gender and gender injustice, but also the issue of race and racism, which is another problem. And in many ways it echoes with the experience we have back home. It's interesting to note that some of the challenges we have in cities like Johannesburg are similar to the challenges people experience in New Orleans. In a way, Katrina here was sort of like apartheid in South Africa. It was a disaster, and we're responding to it, as people here are.
There is no country in the world where slavery happened where they have so many thousands of testimonies of people who endured slavery.
Today I visited the Whitney Museum, and it reminded me of the long histories of oppression people of color have experienced here in the US, but also in South Africa, I guess.
And oftentimes the name of the mother is missing because the children they were already orphans.
I think it's important to learn about the history of oppression so that history can inform our current interventions. I think that this is not just about slavery, though. It's about other forms of oppression as well. I think it's linked to gender injustice and even homophobia and transphobia. I hope to take home from YALI the connections I've made with other African leaders, the people on the program, learning about the experiences from their countries. I think this is really useful because these are the future leaders of organizations and even possibly countries. And I think through building on those connections, we can really strengthen the future of Africa.
Now to the migrant crisis. The Sicilian port of Palermo received 535 migrants rescued at sea on Monday. The ship that carried them also carried 5 bodies. 4 Nigerian women and 1 man from Ghana were found dead on board a dinghy that was rescued Sunday in the Sicily Channel, according to Médecins Sans Frontières. Meanwhile, freight and passenger traffic through the rail tunnel has been severely disrupted recently as migrants desperate to enter Britain have increased attempts to board trucks and trains traveling from France. The crisis has proved fatal for some migrants, 9 of whom have been killed trying to make the crossing. Now some French politicians are talking of scrapping treaties that allow Britain to operate border controls on the French side of the tunnel. Joining us in the studio for more on the migrant crisis is Dr. Dimitris Papadimitriou, President of the Migration Policy Institute, MPI Europe, and President Emeritus of the Migration Policy Institute. Mr. Papadimitriou, welcome so much. Welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Let me start with what I finished with in my read when I was talking about what is happening in France, in Calais specifically. This place has been called the jungle by some people. About 3,000 migrants are there. What is the situation there?
Well, the situation is that people who want to make it, are determined to try to make it to the UK, find their way all the way to Calais, and try by any means to get on trucks or on the Euro Channel or anything that they can actually get on in order to be able to make it to the UK. And the reasons, of course, you know, are the typical reasons. They think that there is a greater opportunity in the UK. They may have relatives, families, or people from the same village in the UK. And because the UK has a looser labour market, they think that they can work even if they have to work in the underground economy.
So then, what is the situation in terms of solution? Whose responsibility is it to really address this problem in this specific area?
Right. Theoretically, these people should have been fingerprinted once they first entered Europe. If they entered through Italy, that would have been Italy's responsibility. But because of the large numbers that Italy has been taken and because of disagreements between Italy and the other member states and Italy and Brussels, Italy does not really do this particularly well. They're doing it a little better because if their fingerprints had been taken, then they would be sent back to Italy for Italy to adjudicate their case and follow through with whatever the follow-through should be. If they were illegally there, they would be removed. Not a high likelihood that this would happen, or if they're asylum seekers, they will be treated like refugees.
Now, it's a combination of different nationalities, including different African nationals and Middle Eastern and everything. Now, there seems to be a spike in the number of migrants that are leaving the country looking for a better life. Is it a perception or a reality?
Well, it is a reality. I mean, the numbers of people who have made it into Europe in the past 6 months are at about 50% higher than the same period last year. So clearly, a whole bunch of expectations lead to people to think that they should make it now. There are sort of incentives that have been created. You know, they know that they're going to be rescued at sea. And they also feel that if they don't do it now, maybe Europe will close up. Therefore, we might as well, you know, try to do it at this very last minute.
And it's a shame to see how many people are dying at sea. Quickly, when we look at solution, I mean, it's a big, complex issue in terms of policy. But if you were to point out one thing, even to block this migration from starting, because that's where it all starts.
That's exactly right. You have to go all the way to the source and to the countries all around the source countries. And for that, you have to invest an awful lot of money, a lot of political, foreign policy capital. You're going to have to start conversations with the countries around let's say, Syria, that has produced about 4 million people who have left Syria, and many of these people are now finding into Europe. We then have to work with all of the countries, the governments and civil society all along their route. You have to attack the smugglers.
Yes.
You have to protect people once they get to Europe.
Okay.
Et cetera, et cetera,
okay.
et cetera.
A big and complex issue. Dr. Papadimitriou, thank you so much for joining us.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
And Dr. Dimitris Papadimitriou is president of the Migration Policy Institute Europe and president emeritus of the Migration Policy Institute. Welcome back in today's second installment of our special VOA series, The Voting Rights Act at 50. Correspondent Chris Simpkins introduces us to some minority elected officials who, without the Voting Rights Act of 1965, would never have had the opportunity to serve their communities.
Former Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin cherishes the personal letters of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the city's Civil Rights Museum.
So you'll see there typewritten letters, handwritten letters.
Franklin spearheaded efforts to secure the papers that chronicle King's accomplishments, like leading efforts to win voting rights for millions of blacks 50 years ago. She sees herself as a product of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which wiped away racial discrimination at the ballot box and led thousands of blacks into a career of public service.
When I was in college, I could not have been mayor of Atlanta. It was impossible. It was impossible to think that a woman, but certainly an African-American woman, had no opportunity to even dream of such. The Voting Rights Act changed all of that.
Now you start to see tens, hundreds of thousands of blacks being able to vote in elections. And this is also sort of really important in terms of sort of the growth in terms of the number of black elected officials in the United States.
Political science professor Andra Gillespie says the law had a powerful impact in boosting black political representation nationwide.
They counted in the hundreds in the mid-1960s. And so now we count them in the tens of thousands.
How you doing? The Voting Rights Act also opened the door for other minorities to seek elected office in places like Texas. Latinos make up about 17% of the state's voter population, and that number is growing. So too are the number of Latino elected officials.
It's part of the reason why I ran, because, I want to help everybody in all walks of life in my district.
Rick Galindo and Larry Gonzalez are among a small but growing group of Republican Latino lawmakers in Texas. Gonzalez says while most Latino legislators are Democrats, Republicans are making gains in attracting them.
We know there are dozens elected at the county level and at the city level and at the school board level. And I think we've identified dozens of conservative Hispanic elected officials in non-legislative capacities that I think would make fantastic legislators.
I'm thankful that America realized that the exclusion of African Americans from the democracy had to be corrected, and it had to be corrected in a dramatic way and not incrementally. And I think America is a better place for that. It's unleashed the talent, the dreams, and the inspiration of millions of Americans and allowed all of us to participate.
Democrats and Republicans agree the country has come a long way in 50 years. However, contentious political divides remain over protecting the integrity of the vote versus adopting new voter restrictions that might harm opportunities for minorities to serve as leaders in their communities. Chris Simpkins, VOA News, Atlanta.
It's time now for our Tuesday Business Report, and joining us live from New York is Africa 54 business correspondent Alexis Christoforos. Alexis, Nigeria is taking steps to get people to pay their outstanding debt. What is happening?
Well, Nigerian banks are naming and shaming those who own large sums of money in the hopes that they'll finally pay up. Under orders from the central bank, Nigerian commercial lenders listed hundreds of bad debtors in full-page newspaper ads this week. The central bank is trying to avoid a repeat of an industry bailout that cost the government $4 billion just 6 years ago. Lenore?
Now, the Greek stock market reopened yesterday for the first time after 5 weeks. How is the market doing?
Unfortunately, not well. Greek stocks down as much as 5% today, taking a beating for a second straight day. And bank stocks are leading the decline once again there. Many of those stocks are down 30%. That's the market's daily limit. The Greek stock exchange reopened Monday with a drop of 16% after a 5-week shutdown imposed by the country's debt crisis and capital controls. Meantime, Greece expects to wrap up its third bailout deal with creditors by August 18th.
And Alexis, it seems like investors are showing a lot of interest for Apple's stock. What's behind the selling?
Yeah, Apple stock is taking a beating, falling to a 6-month low as it chalks up its 5th straight day of losses. The maker of the iPhone and iPad is now more than 10% below its record close of $133 a share back in February. So that means Apple stock has officially entered correction territory. Investors are concerned that an economic slowdown in China could hurt Apple's bottom line, since China is the company's biggest growth market. There's also concern that Apple's smartphone is saturated in developed nations. Still, Apple stock is up 7% this year. It had been up as much as 22%, but some analysts call this recent sell-off overdone. Lenore?
Thank you so much, Alexis, for this great report. And that was Africa 54 business correspondent Alexis Christoforos reporting live from New York. In today's health report, finally, there is a way to end the suffering from the Ebola epidemic that has ravaged West Africa for more than a year. Researchers say a new vaccine is so effective, there may never again be a major outbreak of Ebola. VOA's Carol Pearson has more.
The Ebola outbreak that swept through West Africa has claimed more than 11,000 lives. Children, mothers, fathers, doctors, and nurses. No one was safe. The epidemic was so horrifying that countries around the world finally rallied in sending help, building treatment units, training medical staff, and helping governments in an effort to work towards ending the epidemic. Rival pharmaceutical companies worked together to produce a vaccine, and at last there is one, produced in record time and said to be highly effective.
Based on the number of individuals and cases we see, there is 100% protection in those vaccinated.
The vaccine combines a protein of the strain of Ebola that ravaged West Africa and another unrelated virus. The result is a weakened virus that cannot cause disease, but generates an immune response. Health workers and others at high risk were the first to get vaccinated, along with thousands of volunteers.
What we did was to follow the epidemic in a way. We identified contacts of new cases and also contacts of their contacts, and therefore had identified a cluster or a ring of high-risk individuals. And those were the ones who were enrolled in the study.
No placebo was used because the virus is so deadly, and researchers wanted to save as many lives as possible. Producing the vaccine and conducting the study was an international effort involving Doctors Without Borders and the World Health Organization in Guinea. The Norwegian Institute of Public Health designed the study, and Merck produced the vaccine. There's still no licensed vaccine against Ebola. The licensing process is time-consuming, but the plan is to keep the study going until there are no more cases of Ebola in West Africa. Researchers estimate the epidemic will finally be over in a few months. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. After rocking steady for 12 years, one of music's most famous couples calls it quits. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In South Africa, a court throws out fraud and corruption charges against opposition leader Julius Malema. In Egypt, the country inaugurates a new Suez Canal waterway as it seeks to boost its economy and international standing. In Libya, Parliament wants to continue the dialogue over a proposed power-sharing deal provided that amendments are made to the draft. In Liberia, UNICEF says the more than 70,000 children whose births were not recorded during the Ebola outbreak leaves them vulnerable. Finally, in Madagascar, political instability and woeful air links hobble tourism prospects. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here is what's trending. One of music's most famous couples is calling it quits. Gwen Stefani and Gavin Rossdale have filed for divorce after 12 years of marriage. Stefani is a judge on NBC's The Voice and is well known as the frontwoman for the band No Doubt. Rossdale is the frontman for the band Bush. The pair was married in September 2002 and had their first child together in 2006. The youngest son is 1 year old. Next up, good news for heartbroken One Direction fans. Former band member Zayn Malik will release his debut solo album on RCA Records and Psycho Music. Malik announced his departure from chart-topping British boy band One Direction in March. The band confirmed his departure, and in a statement at the time, Malik said, "My life with One Direction has been more than I could ever have imagined. But after 5 years, I feel like it is now the right time for me to leave the band. I'd like to apologize to the fans if I've left anyone down, but I have to do what feels right." And finally, for years, surfers have relied on nature to provide them with the thing they need most, waves. Now, an artificial lagoon on the site of an old aluminium works factory in Wales is promising what some well-known surf locations can't: guaranteed waves. Waves are formed by an underwater foil shaped like a snowplow that's dragged through the lagoon 50 times an hour. That creates two mirrored waves every time. Consistency means it's a good way to teach beginners while professionals can perfect their moves. There are hopes this technology could help surfing eventually become an Olympic sport. And that's what's trending today. That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 300 and 600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Have you ever heard this American English phrase?
What's the game plan?
This expression is very common in American English, but it does not have anything to do with playing a game. It's a way to ask for information.
So, what's the game plan? What are we doing tonight? We're not sure yet. What do you want to do?
When you say, "What's the game plan?" it's another way to ask someone for the details of a plan. It's the strategy for accomplishing something. In sports, a game plan is a set of instructions for the players to follow so they can win the game. Outside of sports, it could be a plan for going to dinner, seeing a play, or even watching a game. And that's English in a Minute.